The ModernJeeper Show, the show about Jeeps, Jeeping, and Jeepers.
Well, hey, Modern Jeepers, it's another episode of the ModernJeeper Show with me, Matson from Metal Cloak, and Mr. Modern Jeeper, Corey Osborne.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, and Rockstar Jeep Girl, Jessy.
What's going on? Hey, guess what?
What?
It's snowing.
Aw. You know what else?
It's snowing a lot.
Yeah.
You know what else?
It's snowing.
You're not having a white winter. You're having a white Valentine's Day.
That's right.
Yeah, because happy Valentine's Day. It is Valentine's Day. We're recording this on Tuesday the 14th, which is right now for us is a big day because there's a sale going on. It's the
That's right.
I heart my. It's actually not I heart my Jeep sale anymore. It's the I heart my 4x4 sale because we have
still the best commercial ever.
It is, but here's the problem. So people are going to see this on Thursday and go, "Wait, what? There's a discount, and I missed it." So that's unfortunate.
Well, it's just you're not paying attention.
Got to pay attention.
You weren't paying attention. In fact, I was on. We did the live piece, and I tagged our guest on this. We did a live piece on Instagram today because, and you joined us, which was cool. Yes. You were actually on there making some rude comments or something, but it was cool because Mike and I did the whole big live piece, and he was actually holding the ARS Instagram. I was holding the Metal Cloak Instagram. We're doing the dual live, right? I think if we pointed them properly, we'd probably create a singularity between the two, but it was fun. We did that, and that was cool. And we had a good time talking about stuff, but we talked about the podcast because I was excited about our current guest. I've been excited about it. I keep talking about it. I was talking about it on the board meeting yesterday for Pora, which I want to digress for 1 second, which is just the way my mind works. But I had a board meeting yesterday, with the Pora, the Post Wildfire OHV Recovery Alliance. And it was being done at the same time that there's something else going on in the world of the Rubicon. These things always have power plays. There's always power plays happening in these groups. And maybe we'll talk about this with our guests a little bit too. But right now there is an attempt to kind of take the power of managing the Rubicon from the county, from the foundation titled after it, and being done in such a way that it has a more of a statewide coalition responsible for it. Similar, the analogy they're using is how the Pacific Crest Trail is managed, which is a bunch of statewide coalition. There's basically operations and groups, and it goes in between counties and organizations and all that kind of stuff, and it's just maintained. And there's a lot less politics involved because of that. So that's the goal right now at the Rubicon Trail, at least with this particular group. Now, I couldn't be at that meeting because we had our own board meeting. But it is interesting, and I'm still waiting for a full report, a synopsis back on how that meeting went, because I'm sure there's going to be pushback. There's going to be fights, arguments, whatever to happen. But it's just it becomes a problem because more people start focusing on that than actually what we're supposed to be focusing on, which is keeping the Rubicon going, keeping it alive, saving it. I mean, we've been down this path before. Friends of the Rubicon came out of a lack of action being done and a emergency action to save the Rubicon Trail. And I think we're kind of heading in that same direction again, which is kind of sad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've talked about this in the past. It seems to be our trend for the beginning of at least 2023 that we have held on to this land use awareness idea, and we've hoped that the people in the East understand its reach. The people in the West, of course, it directly impacts. And you Matson, you sent me a link this morning. That was an article in the shop, and I mentioned it in our post this morning, which was pretty timely with Dell's kind of a how to deal with government entities article. It's unfortunate that this seems to be our current trend. Now, if people don't get involved, we don't get a say. So that's my first comment on this whole thing. We've had a lot going on throughout the industry, throughout the I don't know. I feel like it's a new year, and all of a sudden there's all these new things coming about, right? So there's land use issues, there's economic issues, there's this electrification idea. Um, you know, I'll throw out there that the Super Bowl had a really great Ram commercial regarding electrification, and yeah. Again,
well, you know, we need to go to electrification because according to the State of the Union, we're only going to have oil for 10 more years.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's been stated, so it be stated, so it be true.
Well, and it was awesome because the Jeep commercial was basically focused on premature electrification, which I just love that.
You gotta love that, and I actually was looking at that, going, okay, yeah. See, there's a place that my mind goes that I wish a lot of our marketing would go here at Metal Cloak, but I'm not ultimately in charge. I'm only one of two other partners, and their mind doesn't go there. So, you know,
and from a corporate perspective, I think that's awesome. Like, it's going to get attention, and it did get a lot of attention.
Absolutely. It was brilliant.
You know,
it was absolutely brilliant. You know, now if we can only notice that was the Ram side, like, you know,
right,
not the Jeep side.
No, Jeep's doing the electric slide theme thing, and
not,
I mean, there's more than just gas here involved with petroleum. So, all of it going to go away? I doubt it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, you know, plastics, right? We're not supposed to use plastics anymore. We're supposed to be bottles. Anyway, we're talking about a lot of stuff that I know our guest is itching at. So, before we get to our guest, what have you guys been doing the last week?
Oh, nothing. We've been hanging out.
You didn't fly across the country to some show and then, you know, see some things and fly back. You didn't do anything.
No.
Yeah. So, kind of it was not even on our radar last week, and a good friend of ours, of course, Ricky Ortiz with Jeepers Den, said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Denver next week. Why don't you guys just drive over and we'll have dinner?" And I said, "Do you understand that we're like 5.5 hours from Denver?" And he's like, "But you're still in Colorado." I'm like, "Yeah, we're 5.5 hours from Colorado." So it turns out that I really we really wanted to go see them, and he was bringing Alicia and his girls, and so he's like, "Well, I'm going to this show, and you should come over and help me out." And I'm like, "Okay, what show is that?" Well, you know, it's the big show, and I'm like,
but
I got nothing. You know, I've never. It's funny. All these years, I've never really been involved on the wholesale side of it. Yet, I've understood. I know who the players are and that kind of thing. You know, and since Trends kind of went away, and I get it, we have Premier and Northridge and that kind of merger, and you have Keystone, you have Meyer, you have a lot of wholesale distributors out there to a lot of shops, and I got to tell you, and a shout out to Ricky again, because him inviting us to join him at the Keystone, the big show, it was a lot of fun for us, because I thought
we learned a lot too.
Oh yeah,
so
I'm like, we're not going to know anybody there.
Yeah.
Well, we probably had more conversations at this event than we did at SEMA. Because it's the individual manufacturers that we've known and dealt with for 20 years. And so this is a pretty big show. It's kind of like a mini SEMA. A lot of little products that are getting released that don't show up at SEMA, yet they're showing up on being available for purchase through the Keystone Wholesaler Group. It was really cool. We had a great time. Yeah, it was. And again,
so is this like an annual show that Keystone does to bring everybody together?
They usually do it at the Gaylord in Texas.
Yeah, usually
then they bring all the vendors. So they bring all the manufacturers in. They're there. Then all the vendors and all the resellers like Ricky are out there to come out and see what's available and
buy.
It is a buying show for the shops, and
oh wow,
I got to tell you, I think it's a very unique event. So this shop is not open, or this event is not open to the public at all. This is for the jobbers. So the jobbers get to attend this event and meet the manufacturers. And I thought, man, that's pretty cool. Now, I know this event has evolved, and years ago, I think a lot of manufacturers were like, ugh, we got to go to this show. This isn't where they want to be. They want to be relating to the public. But this is a chance for them to relate to the actual jobber shops. So again, I mean, and we were at the Gaylord of the Rockies, which is over in Denver, an amazing facility, really close to DIA.
We Gaylord of the Rockies.
Gaylord, it's the Gaylord Hotel of the Rockies, and there's one in Texas, and I guess the one in Texas is like twice as big as the one in Denver. It's
everything's
massive.
bigger in Texas, including your Gaylords.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, Keystone does take care of their jobbers. I mean, this whole event, they took care of rooms. They took care of airfare for the jobbers flying in. They took care of food. It was pretty over the top, and we were very fortunate. We actually burned, it's a 5.5 hour drive. We've accumulated enough miles over the years, and I forget. I haven't flown in a long time. So flying this time was like, okay. We burned some miles, and literally it was like $5.60 a piece for us to fly over to Denver.
30 minutes.
38-minute flight. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys had that little thing. I saw a little post about flying. I'm like, wait a second. I don't remember that on any of the conversations. Where is he going?
Where are
is
you
he
going?
flying? What event are you at? That wasn't
Totally
on the agenda. I don't see anything going on here. What's going on?
Totally spur of the moment. And it was great because there was a metal cloak built rig in the middle of the show, which is interesting because, we're not really a dealer through Keystone. Got to see a lot of our friends. I mean, our friends at Warren, got to make some new relationships, got to see Ryan Hagel at Interactive Garage. I mean, we had some really good quality conversations that I got to tell you, SEMA is so big that we just don't get to have these little one-on-ones like we did this last week.
Yeah.
Well, that rig, that is that Mojito 392.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
That is a full from the ground up rebuild because they don't make a Mojito 392, but they so they worked with Will very closely, obviously, because he has Cloquito. And so it was very close to his heart to see that project come together. But it's a pretty badass rig.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And got a lot of attention. So.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, cool. Well, you're back, and now you guys are just getting ready now you're just relaxing, not doing anything, sitting in front of the fire. Sitting in front of the fire, just your boring life, having a little hot cocoa out in the snow and taking a few inches of snow off the ground. Little hand blower.
Well, it's
dumping. And I was worried because actually today we're under a winter weather advisory and warning. I hope our internet, because it's a wireless connection to our tower, I'm like, I hope we still have internet by the time the podcast comes up.
Because the clouds are super low.
Yeah.
Oh, you just blew it, dude. Like
knock
on wood. Knock on wood quick. I'm knocking on wood for you. Okay.
We gotta just jinx get to our
whatever
guest.
you do.
Yeah.
Throw salt over your shoulder. You just whatever you do, because it's gonna happen. It's gonna.
We got to introduce our guest because she's somebody that I haven't seen personally for many years, and I've always enjoyed having conversations with her throughout the years. And usually we run into each other at KOH, and this year, of course, and last year we didn't go. So Matson.
Yeah, I mean, first off, Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Shannon Welch, now I go way back with Shannon because of Tim Carlson, who was also a Colorado resident. And Tim Carlson was part of a group. Now Tim Carlson goes way back because he had actual original Rev 111 fenders and rockers on his LJ.
Yep.
And so he reached out to us because I was using an image from Ocotillo Wells on one of our promotional pieces or website, whatever, of his rig coming over one of those traditional hills at Ocotillo Wells, right? He goes, hey, that's my rig, by the way, and I have these Rev 111 fenders. I'm like, okay, well, let's get together. And then I meet him. He actually came down came up to Sacramento right around Thanksgiving of 2009, and we wheeling. Like it was, we went out wheeling and snow and stuff, but he also helped us out in our booth at Off-Road Expo that year. So really great guy. Had a chance to meet him. It was awesome. He did a great job repping Motocloak. And then we go out to TDS and I meet Shannon, because Shannon is part of the Big Ugly crew, which Tim was also a part of. And if you don't know what Big Ugly is, you need to Google search Big Ugly, because it was one of the most fun, exciting race teams to watch ever. And it was, the rig was hand built by Kevin, and it was an incredibly well done thing, and it raced great. It did what it's supposed to do, but they called it Big Ugly. That was probably Shannon's creation. So because she was just the marketing gal, and she did a fantastic job with the group, and it was just fun. So Shannon, it's so much fun to see you, because it's been a long time, right? At least with KOH, we were kind of in Ultra 4, we were seeing each other regularly and working together, because it was probably, let's see, I still remember the TDS event. We're sitting there. In fact, Dave Cole had his own booth across from us that year, and it was the year that Dave Cole at TDS decided to drive around with the 50-inch light bar, shooting, a mile into the sky, wherever he was going, right, in his rig. Also, the year,
only 1 year, 2011, I would think would be the year, actually.
Yeah, and he he also did the bonfire there in the traditional desert style of pouring the race fuel all the way out someplace and lighting it up, and there's a blue flame that goes all over the place and eventually gets to the pile of wood. It was just, it was one of those great years. And Shannon walks up and she's like, "Hey, so there's this opportunity," and we started talking about it, and Dave was recruiting her, and well, history is history. But welcome to the show. Welcome to the ModernJeeper Show. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah. That had to have been 2011. Actually, that story came up. You mentioned Andrew Hoyt before the show, and I hadn't actually agreed to work for Dave yet, and it was only like 3 weeks after that year's King of the Hammers. I mean, he'd called me and said him and Jeff had split, and it was so funny because he's like, "Hey, we walk into this." It was Falcon at the time, right? Trailer with Andrew Hoyt. I'd never met Andrew Hoyt before. And he's like, "Yeah, this is my communications director." And I looked behind me trying to figure out who he was talking about, because I was like, "That's not me."
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, that was Dave's confidence, right? The same confidence that told him years ago to say, "I'm going to be doing this stuff for a living one day," right? It was the same confidence, like, of course she's going to be my communications director.
Yeah, I guess so. That was a pretty eventful TDS, actually, because I didn't even remember the rest of that part of that. I remember meeting you, walking up and forcefully putting our because I was Off-Road Expo, and I handed you our information on Big Ugly and why you should sponsor Big Ugly, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm busy doing some other things right now." I walked around that year with our marketing stuff like this, right?
Right.
So that was my first memory of you, actually, but I think those were only a couple of months apart. In all fairness.
I think so. I think it was interesting. See, I remembered the joyous times. I didn't remember the marketing person coming out and saying, "Here, sponsor us."
You know what? Honestly, it was the reaction that I needed, because I kind of walk into everything a little too fearlessly sometimes. And I was like, oh, not everybody's just going to be welcoming of that. Got it. And you and I actually had a couple of conversations after that. But yeah, no, it was a learning moment for me. So that was really, it was good, actually. I don't think of it as a negative memory at all, but a learning memory.
Who's that?
That's Willow. Willow just got home, and she did not like that my office door was shut, so she had to come say hi. Yes. Nice. Yes.
So okay. So how many years did you end up doing KOH?
Ooh. Well, obviously there were the Big Ugly years, but like running as Dave's working with Dave. So right after KOH 2011 to January 1st, 2019. So better part of a decade. Yeah.
Better part.
I didn't realize it was that long. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And that's all through
30s.
that was, and that was from, for context, everybody, like, we see King of the Hammers now, and it's this big, massive organization, lots of stuff happening. When Shannon was doing it, I mean, the closest thing they actually had to like internet TV and streaming stuff was Pirate, pirate guys came out and said I had their van, and it was still kind of the Wild West out there. And 2011 was kind of the year where he had to start getting some, as lack of a better word, shit together. 2010 was probably the last year of a real shit show. And then where it was the Wild West, and it just kind of built up and it grew from there. But that also means that Shannon was heavily involved you were heavily involved in the creation of the Ultra Force series and the nationwide activities that were happening then. And
Everyman Challenge. I actually got to name Everyman Challenge. Most people don't know that, but
oh, really?
I was just calling it that because we were trying to figure out what we were going to call it, and I'm like, it's not going to be the what's now called Race of Kings, right? But it's not going to be that, but the Everyman can be a part of it. So I started calling it Everyman Challenge, and then I didn't know that was the name it was going to stick. But yeah, so Everyman Challenge didn't exist. In fact, Dave went to Moab just after that TDS we're talking about, and I still had a day job and still hadn't agreed to work for Dave. So those two things kind of prevented me from going to EJS.
Well, that was I think that was the EJS was that the, let's see, is that the year?
That's not the year you and I hung out. That was the next year.
That was okay. So there was because I do remember Dave got in the van with me heading up to what was then the Daystar dinner.
Yes. Oh yeah, up on the hill.
Yeah, and he said, "So I'm coming out with this idea," and he was talking about the idea was for Everyman Challenge was fermenting at that time.
Yeah, it was. So I was getting calls from Moab. We're going to do this. I'm like, I thought we said there was only ever going to be one class and only one race. Okay. So there was no motos. There was no EMC. There was no national series. There definitely wasn't any Ultra for Europe. None of that existed. It was King of the Hammers. And then we kind of, like 12 cars kind of went and raced in other people's stuff. Like we'd go race Best in the Desert or Colorado Hill Climb or some short course with Lucas Oil or whatever. But there was no Ultra 4 series at that point. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And the few times, like Shannon's the one who pretty much reached out to me and said, "Hey, why don't you do commentating?" Because I was like, they needed somebody at Stampede. I think Stampede was the first one, right? And do it like, hey, you can do this. That's fine. So suddenly I'm up there doing color commentary, right? Most of my commentary was like, well, when I was doing it, like, it's and trying to fit something in. So, but pretty much, I mean, as far as your team at that time, so when you started, it was Dave, you, who else?
I was, Chris Bolger was involved.
Yeah, so Chris was still involved then.
Yeah, he was a sales guy when I started, but I was really the first full salaried employee of Hammerking. So first person crazy enough to quit their job to take a job making a third of what I'd been making and say, yeah, I'm going to make this my full-time gig. I was the first one to do that, really. So.
And you told me before what your motivation was on that, and I firmly believe that for the entire time you were doing it, and the times, and probably for the years you kept doing it when you thought you probably shouldn't be doing it anymore, was all about the racers. More times than not, you told me that it was like, these are your people. You're there to help them.
It was twofold, actually. I think one thing in retrospect that really that's really been interesting to think about. While the racers are what kept me there, what started me there was really my passion for saving Johnson Valley, and really saving the Hammers, because anybody I was talking to about it before I went to work for Dave, I mean, really the first time I saw Dave Cole, I didn't know who he was, but I had heard there was this guy trying to organize something to save the Hammers, and the Hammers were my playground before there was a King of the Hammers. That's where, Kevin Zakalis, who raced Big Ugly, that's where all of us, I mean, I went out there the first time and I didn't even own a Jeep. I had a 2-wheel drive Ford Explorer Sport. I had friends with Jeeps who said, come to this place called the Hammers. And from the first time I went out there, it was just like this, I don't know. It's really one of my sacred places. I don't even know how else to describe it. And that going down Boone Road is like going home for me. It always has been since the very first time I did it.
Wow.
I love it out there. And the thought that it could go away was something that I just, at my core, believed that I would do anything in my power to fight. And when I looked at who was really leading that fight, I saw Dave kind of at the forefront of that, even before I understood what King of the Hammers really was. So the more I talked, I mean, I was talking with senators and congressmen and stuff like that. I was going and having those meetings because I was told that's what we needed to do. This was like the same person who walked up to you and said, "Here, sponsor my team." I just did what I thought needed to be done.
Right.
And so in doing that, they're like, nobody cares about this place. Like it's not a very used place. And it really wasn't. Truthfully, it really wasn't. The first time I went there, it was on a hand-drawn map. There was no self-service anywhere nearby. I was a single female driving there in the dark from Orange County where I had my job. I'm driving down this pitch black road at night after work on a Friday. I'm like, I'm going to die. My friends they said they're my friends, but I'm not sure they're my friends, leading me to my imminent death down this black abyss of nothing that was the Hammers back then, right? And so everybody said there's just not enough people that care about it. And so what kind of came of that narrative was King of the Hammers was the thing to get everybody to care about it. And so really, when I think about, and now with companies I work with, I start with what's your vision? What's our values? And really when I think about our hockey stick growth of King of the Hammers, it was literally the years that we were doing everything in our power. Over half my time was spent working on Save the Hammer stuff. I mean, wow. And Dave was paying me a salary to do that and sit on those calls and lead the marketing efforts and all of those things, because those two things had to happen together. We had to grow King of the Hammers to save the Hammers. And so the bigger the spectacle we made it by adding more races, by adding the motos, by making it nationally like televised, or all of the things we did were truly done so that the Marines couldn't say nobody uses this land. And that's what it took.
It's funny for me, and Shannon, I don't even know if you remember this, but back in the day I was working for a different company. Yeah. And I remember attending. There was a big Save the Hammers push. And it's funny for me now because I hadn't really thought about this in the past, but one of my pride possessions is this T-shirt that I hang in my garage that I remember, I think I came up to you and I was like, how do I get one of these Save the Hammers T-shirts? Mm-hmm. Yep. And they were $50. And I remember thinking, why would I want to pay $50 for a T-shirt? And of course, then it was, but look what its intention did. Like it was Save the Hammers. This was money being used to save this race, this idea, this thought. And I ended up, I framed that T-shirt, and I've got a few of the Kings that have signed it over the years. But I remember that time I was so starstruck back in those days of being around a number of people that were bigger than life, I guess. Mm-hmm. Sure. For me back then. And it's interesting. That was a long time ago. And here we are talking about land use issues today and all of these things. It's not a battle that has been won. It's something that just continues for sure. And you were very instrumental in all of that.
Thank you.
Well, and I think that the challenge though is what we saved the Hammers, and that was an incredible coalition, right? I got an assembly resolution for Dave, and remember you and I were standing up there reading that, and there's all these little things. But the only time I saw Dave Cole cry, by the way, he was crying there, and these actions. But then the challenge in our world is that it happened, and while the people are still passionate, like yourself, the group is done, right? Okay,
it
Hammers.
Fizzled.
It fizzled. We saved the Hammers, and whereas their organizations, their groups, right, that their only job is to continue to be the eco terrorists that you like to nicely refer to them as.
I love that term.
And they just keep putting us out. They're not environmentalists or eco terrorists. Shannon had to correct me like in a text about that. I've embraced it, but that's the entire reason they grow up, they go to school, they get a job, and they hope to retire someday is to take that kind of stuff away from us.
Well, and they believe just as passionately as we do about saving it as we do getting to use it. And I really think the big difference, I mean, the times that I've gotten to face with them not in a boardroom or not, before a committee, but said, hey, come out here, take a look at this. Dave is actually the one that really, really taught me this. Come with me. Let me put you in my Jeep. Let me show you what we do here. And I'll straight up, I grew up on the East Coast. Actually, Dave grew up on the East Coast too. I didn't grow up around public land. Public land wasn't a thing in New York. Like, it's all owned by somebody there. So public land wasn't something I had any interest in or knowledge of. I didn't grow up off-roading. I thought tenting and camping was something you did for pain. I don't really know why people did that. So I moved to California, but I met a really good friend of mine who had a dual sport motorcycle. I lived at the bottom of a mountain in Orange County called Saddleback, right at the base of it. And he's like, hey, you ever been to the top of that? I'm like, we can't go to the top of that. Why can we go to the top of that? I mean, I was straight Orange County city girl at that point. I mean, I grew up on 40 acres, but we didn't off-road. We didn't do that. And so he took me on a dual sport to the top of it, and we ran into all these Jeeps along the way. And I'm like, well, I always wanted one of those, but I was told girls shouldn't have a Jeep. And but he taught me about public land. Growing up in New York, Jeeps are a real pain in the neck with how cold it is most of the year, and they need a lot of fixing. So that was kind of why I was told that. So bought a dual sport, then bought a motorcycle. Bought a dual sport, then bought Little Red, which is my Rubicon TJ. And really just, I was working on rebuilding trails before I owned something. I would just show up in my two-wheel drive and be like, hey, do you have a spot for me? I want to rebuild these trails, because public lands were just, I thought these were such an amazing gift. And like, people could go out and experience nature in a way that you just don't have in New York. You just flat out don't have. Like, you can go onto people's private property if they let you and don't shoot you. So that's good. But really, other than public, state parks, federally designated parks and stuff like that, there wasn't this just go adventure and choose your own adventure on a dirt road thing. And that changed my life. And so really it became this thing that I wanted to protect, because when people talk about, being out West and freedom, it was a level of freedom that I really didn't even understand the concept of till I moved out here. So that was always part of the narrative for me, was the protecting the land and saving it. And Dave, there was nobody working harder for it than Dave was. I mean, he didn't care if he turned a profit if he saved the hammers back then. And he was really giving as much money as he could to save the hammers at the time. And so to be able to work with somebody that was that passionate about it and threw me into the middle of some things that I couldn't even get my foot in the door on before that. I talked with all the groups that were out there, but here I was, this late 20s, early 30s girl, and I'm like, hey, we should be doing this, and here's my ideas. Much like how I went to Matson. I'm like, hi, I'm here, and this is how we need to be doing it better. And they were like, slow down, little girl. Like, you've got a lot to learn. Calm down. Yep. Calm down. You don't know what you're talking about. Let me mansplain you. I don't know. Sorry, I know that might not be appropriate, but I felt very mansplained too at that point in my life. So do you think were just young, naive girl ideas? And Jeff, who actually oversaw when we brought all of the organizations together, Jeff Knoll, and Dave said, you're better at this than I am. I come in and I just run over things, but you can be a part of this committee. Jeff and Dave were pretty much like, here's Shannon, she's a part of it, you're going to work with her. And so all of a sudden I went from not really having a voice in it on my ideas and my thoughts on it to really kind of being the voice of the Save the Hammers movement for all these different organizations. And Dave kind of made that happen. He made that happen. And so it was really amazing to see that trust kind of put in me, and to really, it probably fast forwarded me 2 decades in the land use world, quite frankly, of what I would have had to do to pay my dues, to not be the little girl with the cute ideas that needed to sit over there kind of thing. So yeah, anyway, I mean to get off on a tangent with that, but that was, Simon Sinek has this book out called The Infinite Game. I'm not a huge fan of him per se, but in The Infinite Game, the thing he talks about is that, for any organization to succeed, they need to have a worthy cause, right? And so when people ask me, why did King of the Hammers grow the way it did, as fast as it did? We did that during a recession. Like, it was insane. But we had this worthy cause. And really, it was after that, Matson, like when that happened, the world kind of just, It was a compromise. That's the hard thing about land use, is it's always going to be a compromise. Nobody's going to get everything they want in that compromise. And everybody walks away pretty pissed about all of the fighting and everything, and the fact that it wasn't what they wanted. And we ended up at the center of that, because it was like, you gave it away. Like, you gave away, like, somehow people thought that we could have gotten more than we got out of that. What they don't realize is there was going to be something signed in the middle of the night that we were never going to see. And we pushed hard enough to at least get the midnight phone call of draw a line or you get nothing. And so we drew the line. Dave, nobody would draw the line. Quite frankly, nobody would draw the line, because nobody wanted to be that person that would be known as the person who made that compromise happen. And Dave's like, they literally said, you've got an hour, draw the line, or it's gone. And Dave's like, here's the line. And then everybody decided that we were bad or wrong, or we gave it away, or whatever. And you can't really go back and defend that. And so while we're calling it a win, we're literally being attacked by, particularly the motorcycle community, was really big on, you guys just sold us under the bridge for just what works for you. And it got real ugly, and we cared and spent so much time on it that you just have to step away from that. And so there wasn't a, hey, celebratory meeting, because half the people in the room weren't happy, or their constituents or their supporters weren't happy. And so it just, and that sucked, to care about something that much. And I mean, it's the first area that was federally designated OHV land. Now, does that mean it's protected forever? Absolutely not. But it makes it a hell of a lot harder for it to disappear overnight on us, right? So, because it has to be federally changed. But yeah, getting all the groups to work together for a common cause, it's the only time I've seen it. And it's something that I would love to see again in my lifetime for things like the Rubicon or whatever. But yeah, really, that was my first purpose, right? Was this worthy cause. And then when that went away, I was like, why am I still here? And that goes to what you started with this, Matson, which was the racers. Such a community had created around it. I have a whole theory on creators versus consumers. And what I love about the off-road community is you have a group of people that are really more creator-based than consumer-based. And what I mean by that is, if I go to a concert, I pay an insane amount of money and I sit in a seat and you entertain me. That's me consuming somebody's entertainment. But things like Burning Man and King of the Hammers, it's about contributing to the culture, right? So for years, everybody who came to King of the Hammers was involved in saving the Hammers, or a race team and building a car that was competing at the Hammers. They were creators that got to create something that gave to this bigger community. And so for me, I've always loved the creator culture that really stemmed from the beginning of King of the Hammers and then continued into Ultra 4. And those families and those people, there's why I go back every year. They're all my family, and they're all over the world. And I believe that there are people on any given time, if I pick up the phone and say, I'm screwed, I need something, that they will find a way to get it to me. And vice versa. I've certainly gotten calls from people in the middle of Baja that needed saving, or other places, and made that happen for them. And to have a community like that is really powerful. And I believe in them a lot. So yeah.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. And that's, and, we were all part of that fight when it happened. But it just comes down to, again, this idea that there was a battle, and people tend to come together for battles. Mm-hmm. They tend to lose interest in wars.
Correct.
And we see it, there's an ongoing war for land use. Mm-hmm. And the individual battles come up and everybody focuses on it, and they go in there and they armor up and they get the job done and they walk away. Okay. And then there's arguments, whatever afterwards. But then it's like, well, guys, the war's still going on. Mm-hmm. I don't care if it's a real war, and we got the Iraq war going on for so long, and most people would forget about it, or the war on terrorism, or what's going on. Even Ukraine, right? Ukraine's going so long now that most people, it's just not hot news. It's not, right. Why am I be involved? I'm like, why do I need to even be thinking about it? And that's the same challenge we have on the land use front, is that it is a ongoing war, guys. But if you don't have big battles with great people leading those battles that are passionate, like look at Oceano. I mean, there's definitely some great people trying to lead that, but there's not as much passion there, at least coming from a general wide community. It's kind of like, okay, well, it's dunes, it's on the ocean. Don't really have a lot of that anywhere. Maybe it shouldn't be, whatever. We're just going to move on.
I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm curious to get Shannon's response, and I'm just going to throw it on the table because it's on my mind. And a lot of folks back east would say that, well, that the Save the Hammers, this whole goal was because there were dollar signs in the future that people were that they had the ability to see that there was money to be made to keep this area open. So, and Shannon, I don't expect you to. I'm not looking to throw anybody under the bus.
No.
I've known Dave Cole for years, as you know, and we've done a lot of things that together that I think are beneficial. But I also know that from the outside, it's like, well, yeah, they wanted to keep it open because they're making a bunch of money now. So I guess I got to throw it out there as to, is there more of a push to keep things open when there's some monetary gain to be had? And is that a vision that comes into mind? Or do you just go, no, we got to save this land because we're not going to get to use it in the future, or we got to save this land because I'm going to have an event out there that's going to be amazing?
So, I mean, there's a few parts to that. Actually, there was a group that got together at just last week at King of the Hammers. The various land use groups all were talking. I will say that Dave got married at the Hammers, like before King of the Hammers was a thing. Dave views Johnson Valley the way I view Johnson Valley. And what I will say there is, I will say this to Dave Cole's face, so I don't have a problem saying it on this podcast, and he knows I would say it. Dave Cole's goal in life is not to make money. I will tell you that right now. As somebody who's worked very close with him, he wholeheartedly does things for the epic experience and adventure that can come from it. And if he has the money to make it happen, he pours all of that money right back into what he has done, in a way that is almost shocking. And I've said that to him many times. Your goal is not to have a fat bank account. If it was, we would do things a lot differently around here than we do.
And that became part of the struggle, right? That was part of the challenge, part of the fun. But it's also that when it's like when he stops everything and says, "Okay, we're going to do this." Well, wait, Dave, that's going to cost. Yeah, so what?
I'll figure out a way to pay for it.
We'll figure it out. We're going to do it.
And he's incredibly brilliant in that regard. But if anybody has the thought that Dave wanted to save it to make money off of it, that's a narrative that they've created on their own, that if you spend 10 minutes with Dave doesn't actually line up with who he is as a person. And that's an interesting one because it's gotten so big. People assume that, oh my God, he's got to be rolling in it. You know what? He started paying the course workers this year. And the bigger it gets, the more that it's not volunteers doing stuff. I got there because he lets me park my camper and staff so I can kind of come and go, which is nice because it's plugged in and I know it's safe. And then I, it's nice. It's the one thing that he's like, you always have a home here. But I rolled in and I'm like, how big is the staff area? And the guy who was keeping track of campers said they had 311 paid staff members staying in that area.
Wow.
So to get it bigger and to get it bigger and to get it bigger, he doubles down and doubles down and doubles down on it. So this whole Dave doesn't have a mansion somewhere somebody doesn't know about. I'll tell you that right now. That's not actually the case even a little bit. He will regularly call me and tell me that I am the highest paid employee they ever had. And let me tell you, it was not a retirement plan. So when people throw that out there, you're gonna find me getting a little. Nope, that's not a narrative that I'm actually going to buy into because it's just not the reality of it. Even there were so many people around going, maybe we shouldn't spend that money. Maybe we should have some other things going on. But more jumbotrons, more races, more this, more that, to make it bigger is he gives experiences like a drug dealer. And he loves for people to have this aha around something, and he lives for that. So money is not what motivates that man. And I will say that to his face. So people thinking that that's why the Hammers got saved. No, Dave saved the Hammers because the Hammers mattered to him. And if he'd spent every last dollar of his to save the Hammers, he would have done it.
That's awesome. That's awesome coming, especially from somebody who was such an integral part of it all and is no longer quote unquote employed by Dave.
Sure.
Like this isn't a paid advertisement for Dave.
No.
So,
and that's the thing that most people don't see about him, and it's a tough thing to say. This isn't a Dave Cole podcast, so I don't want to make it all about him. But really, when I hear that thing about money, no, that really was never Dave's motivation. It was that worthy cause. And that same book, that Infinite Game book that I mentioned, again, it's funny that I keep mentioning it. I liked that book. It helped me put some things in perspective. But you were mentioning Oceano, and Johnson Valley was similar. Johnson Valley was saved by people who loved it. I definitely have people hitting me up on Oceano. How can we do what we did with Save the Hammers with Oceano? How can we do that? And I wasn't involved with any land use groups at the time. And I'm like, I don't know, let me make some phone calls. And what I heard from the heads of all of the groups that you could think of when you think of land use was, that's a lost cause. Fighting that is just, you're throwing good money after bad. And that is how all of the groups looked at it. But what I've seen is this real grassroots efforts from those in the area that will fight for it. So that's the thing about the Infinite Game. The small man, the David and Goliath, right? The David can win in those scenarios because they won't lose. Whereas if you've got big corporate entities or it's board driven, by the time we won the hammers from the Marines, they were on the 5th general there, and he didn't know why the 1st general wanted the land. But we knew what we were protecting. So it was an infinite game for us. And so the person that has the worthy cause, they can be small and they can move great things when they are combined in their efforts to do it. And I don't think Oceano is going to get saved by the big land use groups. It's going to get saved by the people that will do anything in their power to save it. I've never been arrested in my life. I've never been on that side of the law in anything. And I think you know Kristen Carter. Kristen Carter and I, before any of this, because we both love Johnson Valley, like we were sitting like crying over Johnson Valley, right? Like in her motorhome, my home, I don't even know. And I'm like, I would be willing to, if we get there, because there was a time where we thought it was just going to disappear overnight. I was like, I will chain myself to backdoor. I will be that crazy person who will literally be chained to backdoor and say, come on, Marines, I will give that visual to them. And Kristen and I made like this pinky swear bond there that we would absolutely we would chain ourselves to backdoor before we'd let it go. And awesome. It's weird to think about that level of fanaticism, but it mattered that much to us that we were like, nah, we will be that man in front of the tank at Tiananmen to save this area. And that's the infinite game. You will win if you care that much. But if you try to do it by committee, you will death by committee all day long. So yeah.
That's really fascinating because it when you see Oceano, like, okay, so let's just take King of the Hammers as an entity. There was definitely a driving force behind it, right? So Johnson Valley was a obscure idea of a place that a lot of people liked, but you wouldn't have gotten the national attention and the national support without that one element, King of the Hammers. And that, I think that one element, King of the Hammers, is what everybody went and said, well, we got to save this. Like this is cool. This is a cool thing. We're going to save that. Whereas you don't have that at Oceano. You have experiences. And it's probably kind of like Moab. I mean, people aren't trying to save Moab because of Easter Jeep Safari. They're saving Moab because of their overall desire to be there and to have it on their bucket list. I'm not sure of a lot of people that have across the country in the off-road community have their bucket list to eventually one day go to Oceano.
I would argue it's because the narrative hasn't been strong enough around it. So yeah. I actually did a Jeep experience that went there because I knew it was potentially going away. So I had the grand finale of the Jeep experience end there. And when I did it, the thing that I was telling people who had no idea from all over the country was, this might be your last chance to actually drive a Jeep on the beach in California. This might never happen again. And they were like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And to me, nobody has ever carried that narrative about Oceano the way it needs to be carried. And if I had all the time and that I did when I was in my 30s to care about something, and if it was my backyard playground the way Johnson Valley was, I would love to be that person for it. I see people that are fighting it on that level, but I don't think the narrative has been there. And as much as the Hammers was a part of it, and growing King of the Hammers definitely made people care about it, it was also a playground. It was also Pirate 4x4 was a part of it, saying, hey, this is an epic area like the Rubicon, like Moab, like Oceano. This is a mecca for off-roaders, which it is, and it has become on every other weekend other than King of the Hammers now. In fact, my Chris loves to give me a hard time because we'll go out there for Thanksgiving or New Year's or something. There's too many freaking people here. Where did all these people come from? Like, and I'm really it's just so many people and it's chaos. And it used to be my place to go get away from the world, right? And he's like, I don't know. Somebody told them about it. Who do you think that was? And he likes to like, oh, yeah, sorry, I did this, right? I can't be pissed about the thing that I did. I mean, not single-handedly, but I definitely go out there and go, where did all these people come from? And he's like, I don't know. You might have something to do with it.
Yeah, wasn't
it's
it
kind of sad? It's kind of sad that people don't react or respond unless you tell them, oh, by the way, you're never going to get to do this again. Oh, wait, what? Should I have been paying attention? What should I do next? How can I get involved? Well, never mind. Oh, it'll be fine. Oh, good. Well, now I don't have to do anything. So people go back into this I don't know, this reserved, like somebody will take care of it for me response, rather than, hey, this is going on. This is an ongoing thing. But you tell people, this is it. Oh, well, now I'll do something. If it's going to affect me, then I'll do something. But if it's not, I'm out. It's sad.
It is sad, but it's the truth of the matter is this thing, you will never get to do this thing, is a really powerful thing to tell somebody.
Yes.
And it does get that message out there. And I've really been surprised that I haven't seen that around Oceano as much as I would have liked to. But the people fighting it and how they've been fighting it and how they've been fighting the science behind it, I give them absolute kudos for the work that they're doing there. And it really was a grassroots effort. And I know that I don't want to say that there aren't organizations involved. There absolutely are. But when I started getting tagged in everything, when it like kind of post KOH and before I was involved with Blue Ribbon, I called everybody, all the people that were involved with Save the Hammers. They're like, you know, one to one, nobody's going to say it out loud, but Shannon, that can't be saved. When you're getting the California Coastal Commission involved, that's just too big of a beast. And to see them like picking away at it and getting the science revoked, and this isn't real science and it's BS, and I've been so proud of the work that they've been doing, and it feels to me like if they're going to save it, it's because it's an infinite game for them, and they're not going down without the biggest fight of their life. And that's not the organizations, that's the people.
Well, and that's good, because if you think about it, like there were a couple of they did pick at it as far as getting rid of certain things like Huckfest. I mean, Huckfest was as much of an overnight sensation as King of the Hammers was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a fantastic event. All of a sudden, whoa, nope, can't have that anymore, right? And got to get rid of that. And it's too many people, or whatever the reasons were for shutting it down. But they took away what became something that the nation was focusing on, you know, whether it was social media, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, Oceano Dunes became a known area because of that major event. Same with King of the Hammers, right? Nationally, people were paying attention to it. Now, without something like that, it's back to what you're saying. It's the grassroots rebellion that's happening, that's trying to defeat the empire.
I was surprised to see Huckfest didn't do more like what we did with King of the Hammers. But to the money thing you were saying, Corey, one of the things that came up at this meeting this week that Jeff Knoll actually led for the Hammers, that it was actually Matt Martelli, who runs Mint for 100, and he's on the Tread Lightly board, was at this meeting. And one of the things that, I like the way Matt's brain works when it comes to, he's a marketer and promoter, kind of like I am. We kind of we're both storytellers, right? So, and what Jeff did when it came to the financial impact, economic and financial impact or something like that report he put together, which we hadn't really done that to try to save things before. Jeff, along with Pirate helped with it. Like there was this huge survey put out. How many miles do you travel to get there? How much money do you spend on gas in the town? What do you do for groceries? What direction do you come into the area? Surveying, the manufacturers of, do you test your parts out there? How much time and money do you spend in that area? And we could do this economic impact. I'm using the wrong words. It was an economic report that basically we could say we fiscally bring this much money to this area, and the number was big. But it was, we didn't have a lot of data to base it off of. We actually thought the number was a lot bigger, but we didn't want to make up numbers. So that was the first of its kind. And really, I'm shocked at the motorsports industry for not doing more of that across the board. And so one of the conversations we're having is we would really love to see one of these organizations out there really be the person that's, what do motorsports bring to Moab? What do motorsports bring to the surrounding areas around the Rubicon? The amount of money spent on motorsports is insane, but as a group, we do not collectively get together like those that are really anti-access to,
right.
To say, hey, this is bad for the environment. They do a really good job of save this animal, right? And they make a lot of money off of this animal is going to go away and you will never see it again. And guess what? They raise money that way. We have to do the same thing. This area is going away and you will never see it again. But we have to do it from a place of sounding like we care about the environment, because we actually do. We care about the freedom that comes with being able to use the area. And when we only get labeled as like gas guzzling, environment destroying, I've heard it all, right? But really when you can go out there and say, yeah, that's not totally the case. Why don't you come for a ride with me? Why don't you see like when people think, yeah.
You hit the nail on the head and you said the word freedom. And I don't think that people understand. I'm gonna throw Moab out there on the table because this has become an area that a lot of people have moved into. It's no different than St. George. Moab is a little bit older in its growth, but the people that have moved into Moab are now saying, nope, we don't want motorized recreation because now that we're here, we don't like it. And
right. It's noisy.
Moab. Moab grew and became the place that it is because of off-road motorized recreation. And I get it. Do we do it responsible though? Maybe not. And that's an education side of our industry. And I think that's where we failed. I mean, you can take any one of the large events over the years. You can take King of the Hammers, TDS, places out like Oceano Dunes, all these Western states, large events that turn into this chaotic fail, I guess, is because so many people end up going there. Moab, Potato Salad Hill, all of these
no, I get it.
Unmanaged.
It's the notches at TDS. It's the After Dark at King of the Hammers. It's all of that. And it's really, I know people are, they're like, what's your favorite trail to go to? I got asked that all the time last week at King of the Hammers. I'm like, I don't go to trails during King of the Hammers. And they're like, why? I'm like, because I will murder somebody. Right. And they're like, why? I'm like, because I fought so hard to save this area. And when they drop their trash and when they misbehave, I just want to grab them and just it's too much for me. I can't go to the notches at TDS. I never went to Potato Salad Hill. So I know that's a terrible way to live with blinders on, but it makes it really hard to defend this world when I know that exists. And so all I can do is just continue. The way I look at it is education's a huge thing. Tread lightly. You look at their board of directors right now, it's a who's who in the off-road world, right? Like some of the most solid people that I know is on that. They are education, and I want them to work on the education side of it. One of the reasons that I ended up with Blue Ribbon Coalition is they're the fighters. They're the teeth of it. When I really looked at who actually could move the needle on being the national fight group, it was them. I mean, they've got precedent, right? So they've been to the Supreme Court. That matters. They've won at the Supreme Court level to protect snowmobiling in Yellowstone. And when you can say you've been in the fight for 35 years and that you've been commenting on things around this for that long, because at first I was like, because Blue Ribbon was in this real weird state when I started working with them. I'm like, this is a mess. What are we doing? Like, are we share trails? Are we Blue Ribbon? What? I don't understand who we are. I don't understand what our messaging is. Who are we? And as they started to tell me who they were, I was like, let's go back to those guys. They were badass. And if that's where we started, that's really where we should be. And really some of the things that I learned from that was just how big they were in the fights for many, many years. And I didn't know that. Truly, I didn't know that. I knew Dell, and I knew Dell was involved with something called BRC, but I knew more Corva and Cal 4-wheel and that sort of thing than I knew BRC. I knew Dell. But when I really looked into it, and I'm like, well, why don't we just scrap it and start over? Like with all the goofiness that's happened in the share trails. Why are we keeping this nonprofit? Why don't we just start something new and not have to go, well, this is the way it's always been done, right? But what I learned was that you get a lot more respect when it comes to legislative and political things if you are a nonprofit that has been around for multiple decades. If you can say that you have actually commented on this exact issue 25 years ago, they can't tell you that you're new to they can't tell you you're not welcome to this conversation. So we have all of this precedent, this truly legislative and legal precedent there, that if we just went, let's start over and rebrand, right? Completely rebrand, we would lose this history of precedent, which made me go, oh, I see what we've got here. So how do we fix this? So, I don't know if you've noticed the new logo. I have one here. But I worked with them on a new logo. We've really been spending a lot of time around the whole concept of who are we? And we protect motorized access on a federal level is what we do. And it got too mushy, like share trails. I'm like, what does that mean? We already have a tread lightly, which is not mushy. Tread lightly makes sense. But if we are the ones, yes. And yes, that logo right there. Thank you. I was trying to pull it out of my sticker
Wow.
Here. We worked, I did Big Ugly's logo. I've done a few other logos. This is my cold storage logo.
That's cool. That's actually because the old one was just this. I'm trying it because I used to do brochures, right? And I'll donate a bunch of brochures for you guys.
Right. And it was 5 colors and it didn't make any sense.
Yeah. And it had the ribbon, but then it had mountains and then it was all stuff. So that's really cool.
So this is, let me get it closer.
That's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah.
So for our folks that are listening and they're not watching the video, you're gonna have to go to YouTube and actually.
We have to watch the video to see these things. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to describe it.
No, and that was the biggest group I've ever created a logo with. Holy cow! There was the entire board was involved with creating a logo. That was a lot, but everybody cared, right? So we went through this whole process for 3 or 4 weeks, where people put in all this time. But for me, if you don't have a logo that it's simple, but it's also, to me, it's like a badge, right? Because we are the campaign we've been using a lot is defend your ground. We are the defenders. And when we're talking about Moab in particular, with everything that was going on, it was the best way I can describe it is gentrification. And I know that might sound a little funny, but we're gentrifying our off-road areas. When COVID hit and all of that, you have city folks moving to the country, and then they want the country to act like the city, right? As somebody who lives in California, I see all the "Don't California my," name the state, right? Colorado might be the only one where they're like, "Don't Colorado my whatever," too. But that's kind of what's happening. They move there and they're like, I don't want these 4-wheel drive things. I don't want this noise. And that even got a little funky, right? Because they were going after UTVs. And everybody agrees that the side-by-side market is where they're the fastest selling, they're causing the most problems, they're the least educated. We have to get on all of that. So all of the Jeepers kind of went, well, that's a side-by-side problem. And it's like, no, you don't get it. They're starting with side-by-sides, just like Oceano started with Huck Fest. They're starting with the baddest problem, but they're going to slowly let this isn't going to just stop there, guys. And so BRC is the group that helped file the lawsuit along with all the UTV rental companies against the city of Moab and said, you've asked us to jump through hoops without giving us proper warning to do the spark arrestor thing. And it's weird because I've had people from the Jeeping community go, they are a nuisance, they are loud, they're all those things. I agree, they are all of those things. We aren't fighting it because of that. We're fighting it because precedent. If we don't stay in front of the precedent of it, when they go, hey, UTV rental companies, you need to do this. Next time, now it's Jeep companies. And now it's that you have to have certain fenders and you have to, because you're throwing rocks or it doesn't matter what it is. It is literally coming after our industry. And so this is the group that says, no, we're watching and we're not going to let that happen. And it's not as, I like it because I don't really care about being politically correct, but it's not the one that the organizations go, yeah, let's go for the guys that file the lawsuits. Let's go with those guys and give them all their money, right? Because that can get real controversial because we're a Jeep company and we don't want to be on the bad side of Moab, but somebody's got to do it. And we're rolling up our sleeves and doing it. I mean, Ben Burr, who's our executive director, when he heard what was happening at both the city and the county level, right? And heard that they were basically saying, yeah, we don't care what the state has done. We're going to make up our own rules. And not allow side-by-sides to be legal and that sort of thing. He knew some people, so he invited some state legislators to come sit in the audience and hear the local governments making fun of the state legislators. That got them a little riled up. That got them to pay a little attention to what was happening there. And he just said, you might want to see what they're doing over there. I mean, and he just said, it would be good if you sat in and saw how they are viewing state laws in those areas. And then all of a sudden we had a little bit more support on the state level for what we were doing, right? And that's what we do. We don't just wait for things to happen. The good news is enough of a light got shined on Moab that a couple of the people who were most anti-access got voted out this last election in November. It doesn't mean that Moab is saved, but a number of things, like they were working on this thing where they weren't going to allow planes to land in backcountry. That was a huge thing. So we just kind of put some stuff out. And by we, Ben Burr, the executive director, the staff at Blue Ribbon Coalition, these guys are amazing, literally reached out to all of the airplane groups, right, and said, hey, this is about to happen, and they all rallied, right, and they got in touch with their people, and all of a sudden it's indefinitely postponed for now. But you have to stay in front of that, and you have to get those people involved, and that's a weird thing, right, because it's like we're working on Save Lake Powell, but we're working with airplanes, but we're working with, and so our thing is motorized. If it's motorized and it involves public land, we are in.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that because it's Blue Ribbon Coalition, and that is the purpose of it was to be a coalition of organizations. I'm only going to interject now because of something that on our roundtable podcast that Ian was focused on, and I find this interesting because he didn't necessarily, maybe because almost what you're talking about BRC is maybe what Ian was hoping would occur, but in his conversation he was saying that maybe SEMA needs to be the organization that takes up these fights, that SEMA is one because they've got, what do they have? They have legislative history, they have the power, they have the finances, they have the eye of the organizations of the groups, and of course all of the member companies around that all depend to a great degree on this having motorsports access. But it sounds like BRC is the one that's actually doing some of this stuff, and maybe that's where that, I don't know if it's just not being communicated enough, because I only know BRC from my years working with Dell, and Dell Albright was Blue Ribbon Coalition, and I'll say this, I don't know what battles occurred in those years that I was supporting Dell, and other than the fact that it was a constant awareness thing, right? And when they were traveling the country and fundraising for Blue Ribbon Coalition, and then there was the big change, and of course the change happened the way it happened, and there was lots of hurt feelings in the way the changes occurred. But the BRC today isn't even the BRC that existed at that changeover. Like there's been a complete change, the board and everything else. So you see this new organization coming out, which sounds pretty badass, and but we've got to. What you're doing, what you're talking about, I don't even know what's happening. Like I'm not hearing about this stuff. So come on, communications girl, get it out there.
Yeah, if I the amount of time I spend on something that again, this is the $0 involved. I'm obviously, boards are strictly volunteer, right? So, but I'm probably putting in 10 to 15 hours a month minimum on it, probably more like 20 to 40. But with that, they've just hired a marketing director. We're getting her up to speed on it, and it's you know what? There's not a lot of money. The staff members that do it out of passion more than out of what they're making dollar-wise, because I'll tell you what, there's not enough money to pay me to do it on a full-time basis. And that's the sad part of it, is that you couldn't get my talent to do it on a full-time basis. Yeah.
There's some guys in the window signaling me to come out because apparently there's some conversation that needs to be had. So I'm going to let the two of you I'm just stepping away.
Yeah, no worries.
But keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw out there that and this is just looking at social media the last few days, and it's always interesting to me that here we're fighting for public use, motorized recreation. We're fighting for that, and I still see that social media wise, we can't come together. We get into these. Don't go to Moab. Moab sucks. Go to Sand Hollow because we're so much better in at Sand Hollow. We don't have all these rules, and Moab doesn't want you there. And guys, I got to tell you, social media, like this needs to stop because we're all in this together. So these negative connotations, whether I'm not going to ever go to Oceano Dunes, I'm not going to go to Pismo, I don't like it out there, it's California. Guess what? These are where, Shannon, you said it, our freedoms are at risk here. And I don't think that we can even come together as a Jeeping community yet and understand there's still this, oh, don't go there. We're cooler in Colorado or wherever. Like, stop. We've got to come together. We've got to put our forces into supporting our freedoms and standing behind our freedoms. I don't care if it's in Pennsylvania, Delaware, Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, wherever. It's a collective. It's a coalition. It is important that we all be positive in supporting each other. And I'm going to throw this out there. We've all, like Shannon said, the side-by-side market, we understand. We're all frustrated by it. We don't know what to do about it. Not even the manufacturers know what to do about it. But guess what? We have to embrace it because we're only going to be the only ones that can kind of support it, educate it, the users, these guys that we see on the trail. And we've talked about this in prior episodes where it's a confrontational thing. We don't want to tell somebody that they're in the wrong. All of those things.
We can't win if we're separate.
Right.
No matter what, we can't win.
Yeah, we have to combine forces. We can't just say, sorry, I don't like those guys. It's not my problem. I'm going to move about my business. That's not where we are today.
No, we really aren't. And I think what I would love, personally, what I'd love to see, and what I've said in a few different forums is, when I bought my motorcycle, even my dual sport, you go to a motorcycle dealership and you tell them you're buying a motorcycle, they'll pretty much tell you you need to become an AMA member, like right there on the spot, right?
Yep.
And I really think, that doesn't exist with Jeeps. It doesn't exist with side-by-sides. And really, when you become an AMA member, and not everybody does, you're always going to have the potato salad hill and the nighttime at KOH people that are, I'm not doing that, I'm not part of anything, right? And that's fine. But even if there was an organization, and I see Tread Lightly as really growing in funding and that sort of thing. So, I mean, they just got that $500,000 donation, which is more than like BRC's entire budget, which, by the way, all of that is public knowledge as a nonprofit. Things I'm learning. Yes. So I'm not sharing secrets. But with all of that, what is the thing that you need to join to own that off-road vehicle? We all need to be united in what that thing is that you join. That is your education thing. That is your, AMA does lobbying. I mean, themselves can, I think, because they're a 501c3, but do they have arms that do lobbying? You better believe they do. And so that's what we really need. I'd almost love to see SEMA become that, or I don't know who it would be that would be that. Tread Lightly, maybe. That's the thing we're really, at a high level, I'm seeing some real good conversations happen around. Let's all identify who we are. Let's talk about how we're overlapping. Let's not overlap. Let's all figure out what our goal and role is so that we are sending money where it needs to be sent and not spending double the efforts between 3 different organizations who are all then chest pounding going, we're the ones that did it. We're the ones that did it, when it just needs to get done.
Well, exactly. And Madison had sent me a link to this right to repair legislation that is coming back around. Yeah. And again, this whole Repair Act, whereas SEMA isn't a big part of this, again, this is legislation that affects us all. And we're just, as consumers and enthusiasts, I don't think a lot of people are aware. We just kind of go about our business until we're told, you can't do this anymore.
It's because it takes work. You have to learn those things. You have to learn who those people are, and it takes work.
Yeah, and so it would be really good if you were paying some organizations to be your watchdogs for you and to tell you, hey, we need you to step up and fight on this right now. And that was one of the things with the hammers that I learned was we couldn't tell you every step we were doing all the time. There were things that just weren't really something that you could share with the public while they were happening. And I learned that actually Fred Wiley, who's the head of Orba, was really probably a really big mentor of mine through that process. I'm like, all right, we're going to tell the world we're doing this now, Fred. He's like, Shannon, that would be the worst thing we could do at this moment. I just need you to hold on that message. I'm like, okay. Now can we tell the world? He's like, not yet. And he's like, okay, go. And I'm like, okay. And I was ready to tell the world, right? But there is what has to happen behind closed doors, and then there's sharing. Okay, guys, this is the next step. Not only just the next step, but let me tell you what, like. The biggest thing that I think all the public land use groups get wrong is they're like, we need your money, we need your money, we need your money, we're doing this. And then you never hear what it is they actually did with that. Or, oh, I went and commented on that. And then you never get any follow-up on it. And it's like, whatever happened? I wrote a letter. Well, you wrote a letter on that one thing. There's now been 5 more things since then.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to always explain it to people. But one of the things that I've been really pushing initiative-wise, at least with BRC, is, guys, we have to keep telling the story. Like, even if it takes a year between you made this comment and we hear something back on it, I want to see every 3 months, anybody who made that comment is at least getting an email from us saying, hey, you made a comment. This is what we're watching. This is what we're waiting on. Just know that we're keeping an eye on this. There's not much we can do until they respond, but we haven't forgotten about you, and we haven't forgotten about this issue, because mostly it's just dead silent. And people are like, oh, I don't know, I gave money or I wrote a letter and I have no idea what happened. And shame on us as the land use groups for not really carrying that message. And the problem is there's just so few people that really do this on a full-time basis that they're doing it, but they're also dealing with 1,000 other issues, right? Because there's always a new issue that they're dealing with and commenting on.
And
that
money,
to go,
money can be the easiest thing to transfer instead of somebody going, okay, now you gave us money. How do you want to help?
Right.
And it's a very sad thing that I don't know, maybe it's an age thing, it's a maturity level where I don't the people that are in their 20s and early 30s, that they're not paying attention to a lot of the things that are going on that may change their livelihood. This Repair Act, literally, this is legislation that's been written to make sure that a consumer can get their vehicle worked on. Now, I'm just going to leave it at that, because really, this is a risk. Like, by the way, you can't just go have your vehicle worked on. There's legislation out there that is you shouldn't have that right, which is crazy.
It's insane. By the way, I'm back. Thanks, guys. Everybody, I love you back. Thanks for taking. I love the conversation. Now I'm going to actually listen to the podcast to discover all the stuff that I missed.
It is,
but it's insane. It is absolutely insane that they had to create a right to be able to repair your own vehicle, a right for a small shop to be able to, right for some guy to be able to do it in the backyard, and it's incredible for our industry. I mean, it's not on anybody's radar, but look how many we make products so people can install them themselves in their garage.
In this piece of legislation, there is a whole paragraph that relates to cybersecurity. Now, remember, as we go forward, our vehicles have wireless connections. These are literally computers driving down the road, and there has to be legislation written to protect our privacy, and somebody can access your vehicle remotely. That is how these systems work. So again, there's a whole lot of work that gets done behind the scenes that we don't even think about. We just go buy a vehicle and we go, yep, off we go.
Then my Jeep yells at me for not having an oil change. My phone yells at me for not having an oil change.
That's right.
Oh, I have a low tire pressure. Yep. I mean,
1,600 computers, and just my minivan has 1,600 little computers in it. And it's like, and those aren't even the ones that monitor you.
No,
Yeah, there are standards in place, not only by the Department of Transportation, but by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, that these are all standards that have to be addressed when you buy a vehicle. And people we're oblivious. We just, until something affects us directly, and we get some notification on our screen in our car that says, you can't drive today. What?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, look at that. Hey, how about a bad air day where suddenly it says, I'm sorry, today's a bad air day in California.
You should stay home.
Yeah, diesels are not allowed to drive on the road.
Right.
Listen, in Dubai, right, and in all of the United Arab Emirates, when you're out there, right, there is a period of time where trucks are not allowed to drive, right? During morning commute and afternoon commute, all the truckers are parked on the side of the road. They don't drive. And when they were doing deliveries, we were out at the airfield. We're taking trucks in. They came in, they got loaded, and they wanted to get going again so they could get to their destination before 3 o'clock hit. And they had to sit on the side of the road and wait for the 2-hour commute hour. So precedent is out there in the world for this kind of stuff.
Think about this in numbers: 292 million passenger and commercial vehicles just in our country. 292 million. So when we talk about land use fights, we talk about how many off-roaders there are.
Right.
We have a huge force behind us. There's 292 million vehicles on the road. Instead of thinking about, but there's just a few off-roaders. No, think about that as a number, as a force to fight for our freedoms.
Everyone uses access roads.
Use them the way we want.
That's that thing. I wrote in my email to the medical customers on Friday. It was what Ted Cabral brought up in last week's meeting, which was that if you use a road to go hunting, if you use a road to go kayaking, if you use a road to go bird watching, if you go roads to go hiking, if you anytime you're using those roads, you are an OHVer. Right? Yep. It's not just the guys going rock landing or overlanding or off-roading or rock crawling. It's not just that group. It's you have used a dirt road that was not on a highway. And that dirt road was maintained by somebody so you could get to a location.
It's interesting. Yeah. But even within the organizations, I'll tell you, last week alone, there was a conversation about this with the groups I'm a part of, because Ben Burr, executive director for BRC, was going after, there's some legislation against photographers on public lands that's happening right now. Yes. And so all of a sudden there was why do we care about photographers? How do they get there? They didn't walk there to take that photography. They didn't. So, because at first it was like, does that really count as our users because it's photography? And it's like, well, they didn't ride their bike there with their cameras, I'm pretty sure. Right. So we are still talking about shutting down access to everybody. It just, they erode at it in very different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things when it comes to being proactive with this that I know is really one of the things we have to start doing what the anti-access groups are doing. We have to start educating. There are enough youth that care about this, but then we don't put them through programs where they learn about, what legislation are we trying to watch for? What legislation would we like to see? Things like right to repair, right? Like we need to get these people placed on staff members who believe in our freedoms to this. And we don't do that. As an industry, we don't do that. But the anti-access groups, they literally are creating these armies of people that they go, hey, Senator so-and-so, you should have this person on your staff. They're a great, public resource, public lands person for you. We need to be doing the same thing from an access versus anti-access standpoint, which I actually prefer those words more than eco-terrorist and environmentalist. But when we're told that when we're told that we are not environmentalists, that kills me, because the amount of conversations I've had, because I almost joined, what's the big one? Before I off-roaded the anti-access group, the one that Sierra Club, thank you. I always joined the Sierra Club. Like I moved to California, I'm like, I'll join the Sierra Club. Like, they're good for the environment. I didn't know, right? Like, and I've actually had some people that were very close to or members of the Sierra Club, and I've taken them out in my Jeep right here in Southern California, and I'm like, here, let's go talk about what they're trying to shut down. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, I've never seen a member of the Sierra Club out here, like ever. Not once. They're not the ones rebuilding the trails. They just want to stop us from being on the trails. We're actually out here getting rid of the down trees. We're actually down here making sure that this doesn't wash away into the hillside, so that it's still a fire access road for, fire prevention, that sort of thing. Sierra Club doesn't care about any of that. And it blew my mind, right? I'm like, oh. And so it's a real education thing, but we're not going to be able to educate them all, but we do need to put people in strategic positions to play this game of chess that we're playing. And I don't think we do a good enough job of that right now. And that's really one of the things that I would like to see in my time with all of this. And yeah, I know that you said you wanted to stick to around an hour 30, and I think we're getting close on that, Matson. So.
It's all good. It's all good. Actually, I just got a notification that my 3 o'clock isn't necessary, so I'm good. And I'm not doing the post production on this one. Gary is, so it's however long it takes. Thanks,
Gary.
It's funny. I went to the Sierra Club website because my father was a member of the Sierra Club back in the 60s and 70s, right? When that was it was about the Sierras, and it was about really about preserving, and it was about trails and hiking and stuff, right? The thing on their homepage is the gas stove controversy explained in one chart. Like, this whole thing, you got to get rid of gas stoves. What percent of childhood asthma attributed to gas stove use? I love the word attributed, because nobody can actually go and prove whether or not something it's attributed, right? My back problem is attributed to somebody's toe fungus in New York. I can guarantee it. It's like what's this attribution? So it's fungus? but I would like to say that Florida is only 3% caused by gas stoves. So if you live in Florida, thank you, Ron DeSantis, you did it again, buddy. It's just incredible, the insanity of what the people need to focus on. But it's just people need to have a focus. And in this case, they have a focus on something that they think is good. It makes them feel good. But I've talked about this before, and there is a book, and I'm going to have to get the title on it as I'm sitting here. Maybe I'll try to post it. But a study of statistics was done. Now, Mike Rowe, we all love him, I'm sure. He did another podcast with a gentleman who wrote a book about understanding statistics and statistical data and the stuff that they're doing. And one of the things they're doing is they found ways, because current survey methodology doesn't work. You can't just go and call somebody and do a survey, because people are biased according to what they think they should be saying. So they do a bunch of test survey questions within the surveys, and these hidden survey questions actually answer questions more so than the actual survey questions. And they get tendencies, and they look at charts, and they look at how it all flows. And they find 9 times out of 10, what people say is not what they actually believe. So if we can tap the people that, whether it's climate change or anything else, if we can tap what people believe, we can win, because it's showing them that message. And there's a number of the top, what do people think is the most important? Well, climate change is very important. No, it turns out climate change on a scale of 1 to 50 is like number 49. It is not what people truly have, what's important to them. But we get in this point where there's so much pressure on us to be right and to be good that we talk about, oh yes, it's so important for Greenpeace to go out there and ram whaling boats but what do we really believe about that? So in the case of and unfortunately these organizations like Sierra Clubs, like they go and push you to give them money so they feel better about themselves, but people don't really know what they do. I mean, the fact that REI was a signature on the letter to close Moab and make Moab a wilderness area, like, do you know what you guys sell? I mean, you sell mountain bikes. Mountain bikes aren't going to be allowed out there if it's a wilderness area. Like, do you really understand what you're signing on? And most of them don't. They don't really understand, but it makes them feel good. So it's just a fascinating thing. So what you're doing out there now, how long have you been? So because I think when the whole thing happened with Blue Ribbon Coalition, you actually reached out. Like we talked a little bit about BRC. Now, did you originally just start doing some contract work for them and then go on the board? Did you go on the board right away?
No, I went on the board right away. Well, not right away. I really wasn't sure. I'd heard all the messiness around it and really wasn't sure. But I got a lot of calls when I said, hey, I'm no longer with King and the Hammers. And some were certainly from some of the land use groups that wanted me to do some contracting work with them. I didn't agree to do any contracting work. And then Spencer Gilbert, who I think he was the executive director of BRC at the time, who didn't come from this world at all.
No, was he like a political animal?
Yeah, kind of.
I remember seeing his pictures of him, like selfies with politicians and.
Yeah, I mean, he went to Duke University, and I don't really know. He got introduced to me at King of the Hammers by Steve Gardner, who has passed a few years ago. And he was like, you need to meet her if you want to know about Save the Hammers. And so we got talking a little bit. And he hit me up, and he said all the things that you want to hear somebody say. He's like, I've been told I need to talk to you, that you have integrity and people listen to what you have to say when it comes to land use stuff. And I'm like, I don't know about any of that. I just care about land use. And he's like, we need people to make a difference around here. We've got to change this all up or it's going to die. And really kind of full court pressed me on it, but I didn't really know him. And obviously I knew Dell, and I wasn't sure what was going on. But as I really looked into it and looked at who they were and what they did, the biggest thing that I want to do is I want to be able to make a difference. And yes, education is important, but the fight and the messaging around the fighting, and really understanding what we had to put. We didn't save the hammers by the petitions and that sort of thing. Yes, it got people aware of it. The work that I learned how to do when it came to the political side of it was really a big part of it that most people don't even really understand. To have people go, okay, the congressman for the area around the hammers, he doesn't want to get involved because he's ready to retire as a congressman, and he does not want to be between off-road and the Marines. He's on his way out the door, and he wouldn't call us back, just wouldn't talk to us, wouldn't have anything to do with it. Like, just was like out. So we knew that there was a seat coming available, and I'd never done anything with this kind of level of chess, right? Political chess. And it was, these are the two guys that are likely going to get that seat. Go talk to them. So our people did. And one of them was a Marine. We thought, oh, he's going to be the guy that's not going to help us. Turns out he was the best advocate we could have ever gotten. So we started to talk to him. He cared about off-road. He cared about bringing money into the area for his people. And when the Marines showed up at his door, quite frankly, in his office to intimidate him and go, as a Marine, how can you possibly be doing this to us? He's like, I don't think you know what you're doing here right now. You need to turn around and walk back out, which is a pretty powerful thing for a former Marine to do because he cared so much about what we were doing. So Congressman Cook, we were like, this is the man that will support what we need to do. And obviously your land use groups can't do that because they can't be politically involved. But Hammerking isn't politically affiliated. So, we're going to have a fundraiser for this gentleman that wants to be congressman, and he's for us. And Congressman Cook, when he got in there, got himself on the right committees and really cared about this for his area, because we were able to show him the economic impact of what it would be for Yucca Valley, which is not a very wealthy community by any stretch. And Dawn Rao, who was the mayor of Yucca Valley, really was instrumental in that. She became part of his staff. She is now a county supervisor in San Bernardino County, which is one of the largest counties in California. Also happens to be where King of the Hammers happens. And so you learn that you have to have these. Thank you. I'm getting drinks brought to me. Thank you, my love.
Ooh, nice.
Healthy ginseng something here. Probably because he knows my voice sounds like this. Watching that play out, watching that we were years in the making to be able to have a seat at the table around saving the hammers is the stuff that we need people to be able to be strategically thinking about doing. And that's not something that's easy to publicly talk about. I mean, I'm sure there's people who are like, Shannon, you're saying too much on this. You know what? We have to talk about it on some level, or nobody's going to understand what needs to happen. And really, did you guys know all of that about Congressman Cook till I just said it? I'm guessing no, right? You might have known a little bit, but no, right? So these were the things that have to happen behind the scenes, and you have to have people watching for that. In our world, we don't want to get that involved in politics, but we need people who care that much. Or
especially these days, nobody wants to get that involved in politics. I mean, politics. The greatest joke about political bloodsuckers and politics is true, because this is the world that we're in. And unfortunately, it's even more so now, where you're on one side or the other. You have to choose a side. So for a group to actually try to cross the divide and build a coalition between different people, and you keep mentioning this idea of throwing people in the Jeep and going and doing it. I think that's kind of the greatest experience. We have, we bring out the OHV commissioners, and we do occasionally there are VIP runs up on the Rubicon Trail. It's just a go in and go out. It's generally not. Sometimes they'll do an overnight camping at the springs and give them the full experience, but it's that same thing, bringing people out. This is what we do. This is how we do it, and helping them understand it's not just about this idea of a bunch of us, going and destroying the land and running upstairs and throwing rocks and all this kind of stuff. We're actually, every organization, every group, every hobby in the world has yahoos. But for the most part, we're doing it. So I think that's kind of a great takeaway for anybody who's playing this game. Even our state senator, Mark, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago,
Mark
right?
Maynard, he's on the board with me. Yeah,
exactly. That was kind of funny. I didn't quite realize you were on the board. I kind of knew, but didn't. It was like one of those things sitting in the back of my brain someplace. And so I'm looking at the board and I go, "Whoa, Shannon! Hey, let's get her on the podcast." But he has this event coming up this coming Friday. In fact, I think it's this Friday.
Yes, so in West Virginia.
Yeah. This it is kind of an outdoorsy type of off-road event for people of different parts of the outdoor community to come together. And it's there on the state capitol grounds. And in fact, one of our guys, Curtis, is going to be out there, with Venture Rack Systems. He's going to have some stuff out there and give away some calendars. If you're in the area, come get yourself a free calendar. It's a great little thing. But that education and communication, we sometimes forget. One of the reasons we do the podcast is to communicate to more people. One of the things I do at the office, anytime there's a challenge between groups, I bring the different groups together. We sit in the room and we communicate. Solve it, communicate. We sometimes forget the way we solve problems of any level, whether it's with our access, whether it's with what we're doing, is to communicate. And communication, it takes many different forms. It's not just the words, right? Yeah. It's the feeling, it's the imagery, it's all this other ways of communicating. So thank you for reminding me about that, because I kind of forget that sometimes. Just throw a guy in a Jeep and go for a little trip, and you might gain something out of that is going to save the world.
It's shocking, at least our world, right? It might save our world, and what matters to us. So
I think bigger than that. It's going to save the entire world. There'll be no more wars. Off-roading. If
everybody just went off-roading, there'd be no wars.
If you got Putin in a Jeep, we can end the Ukrainian war right now. Just take him out in a Jeep, not one of those Russian pieces of shit. I mean, a Jeep, right?
Oh, that's funny.
Goodness.
Well, it's been awesome. So I do have a couple of I was going to ask. We have our little fireball questions sometimes we throw at the end, and one of them happens to be favorite Jeep. But your favorite Jeep is your TJ. You still have that?
I do. It's getting a motor swap right now.
Wow. How many miles you put on that thing?
Believe it or not, because I worked from home for over a decade, it only has 125,000 miles on it. So, but they were hard miles. So it's getting a motor swap right now. And then actually I have a Grand Cherokee Trailhawk right now that I'll tell you, as far as a all-purpose vehicle, I've really fallen in love with. I mean, I wouldn't do any hard trails in it, but I've definitely taken it off-road at the Hammers. I mean, not uphill trails, but definitely to get around Boone Road. How's that? And it's done just fine that way. That Hemi. Though I just found out that the 2023 won't have a Hemi in it, and I wanted to get a new one. And
when are they supposed to do that straight six? When are they supposed to do that? The new straight six engine? Corey?
I don't know. I have to look into it. I was saying, I want to trade it in for the 23. And I was told, why would you do that if you can't have a Hemi? And I'm like, I didn't know I couldn't have a Hemi. That's a problem for me.
We took a fleet of those Grand Cherokee Trailhawks through the Rubicon Trail a number of years ago when they were first released. Yeah. And they're, as far as comfort goes, just an amazingly capable vehicle. Matson, you mentioned that twin turboed Hurricane engine. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
why?
There's been less and less talk of it, more and more talk about electrification. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, so I was just out visiting Thurin Fabrication, which is up there. They're a go fast Ram company, and they happen to be up in Bend, Oregon. And I was up there visiting one of our engineers, and so I went by and say hi to Don and meet and take a look at his operation, which is a top class operation. He has a great group over there. And he had parked out front the Rivian truck. Now we can all get into the discussion, and there's lots of discussions about electrification and its value in the long term. But he'll say that is a scary vehicle to drive, because when you pin it, it throws you back. And this is a guy who used to he builds go fast Ram trucks. I mean, he builds fast rigs, and that just throws you back. So
there was one at King of the Hammers, and the girl who has it is one of the assistants out there, but she works at Rivian when she's not there. I've gotten to ride in it. It's fast. It's fun. The giggle factor is there for sure. The torque, right? It's the torque. So Dave, my very first year at King of the Hammers, said, "Do you want a supercharger on your Jeep?" Because somebody was testing one. I'm like, "I don't know. Do I?" That's as far as I went. He said, "Hand me your keys." And by the end of King of the Hammers, I had a prototype supercharger on Little Red that's been on Little Red since then. A few headaches along the way. It wasn't totally carb ready when it got installed and all of those things. So, but we got it worked out. But that torque makes a hell of a lot of difference. And that's the one thing EVs have in spades. And so that's a real interesting thing to have that power straight to the wheels that quickly.
Well, and it's interesting, this year there was no EV class, which is last year there was one.
Did Kyle show up again?
It wasn't Boston Kyle. It was a different one. And actually randomly the night after, what's that?
I didn't see it, so
I didn't honestly see it either. It was in the EMC race, and they made it a little bit further. But who was there was somebody who consulted with, actually, who worked at Rivian and hired the girl that I know that works at Rivian, the woman that works at Rivian, that now is an independent EV consultant, and he is actually he works with all of them, basically. Really big brain individual that was just low-key sitting there on a couch. And actually Dave walked up and said, "Do you two know each other?" I said, "No." He goes, "You guys are gonna love each other's brain. Discuss." Like Ryan, Shannon, and walked away, and he's like, "This is the best thing I've done all week," and walked away and left me to talk to this guy who is the IT guy for Burning Man, who is Dave Cole's now EV safety consultant, and who literally is employed by all of the EV guys out there, that he kind of works when he wants to, and his brain was really brilliant to talk to for a while. I don't know if I love the EV world even a little bit, but it was interesting. I'll say that. It was interesting.
It was last year that wasn't, there was a manufacturer that donated about 10 battery systems.
Didn't happen yet. So I think that's taking a little bit longer than they wanted it to take, but that's
premature electrification.
Premature electrification. Like Dave said, and I didn't, and this is where Dave really is one of those visionaries, right? Another book that I love that I use with all of the businesses I'm involved in is called Traction. And the whole concept is that every company has a visionary and then an implementer, or an integrator. And so you have to have a visionary. You can't have 5. If you have 5 visionaries, you need to have 5 companies, right? Because one person chases the shiny objects. But years ago, Dave said, "Nope, I want to offer $1 million for the first electric vehicle." But he said it years ago, before anybody was talking EV anything. Right. And I'm like, "What are you talking about, Dave?" And like watching it kind of just slowly start to make its way into that world, he saw that way back, and he's like, "We're gonna have to embrace it. If we don't embrace it, like it's just gonna be one more reason that we don't get to exist." Which was,
think about the guy who won all the money that guessed that one of these days there's going to be a Chinese balloon that goes all the way across the United States.
There were,
well, they've been doing it for years. Just the current administration is the only one who's ever detected them.
Right.
Oh, by the way, those same Chinese balloons are actually the main source of cell towers in China. And we know balloons stay in one location and never get blown anywhere else in the world. So, by the way, I do want to say one
question.
I did want to say Todd Rose is the name of the gentleman I was speaking back earlier, who did whose company Populous does these surveys. And the book is Collective Illusions. Is his latest book, and it is a great dive into understanding what we think we know that we don't actually know, or what we think we believe.
I'll have to take a look at that one for sure.
How do we know what we don't know?
How do we know that we don't know what we don't know?
Right.
That's a good question.
It goes back to the Black Mirror shows. Like, you start questioning reality at that point.
Black Mirror, I tell you, you want to get spun out.
I've only watched a half of an episode, and there was a pig and a politician, and I didn't understand.
Oh, yep.
That's as far as I made it.
Keep going. Keep going.
Animal Farm?
And that was as far as, and everybody tells me like, "Oh, Shannon, you got to watch them," and I haven't. I don't watch a lot of TV, so that's part of it. But yeah.
Well, I know we do need to wrap up here, but I have one last question for you, and it's one that you said you don't answer when you're actually out at King of the Hammers, but I do need to know because our audience wants to know: is what is your favorite trail?
Oof. Yeah, I don't have an answer for you on that one.
Oh no, Shannon, without an answer.
I don't have an answer. I've gotten to see some pretty crazy stuff with Ultra 4 all over the U.S. and Europe and all of that. You know what? It's probably going to be, and I don't have a name for it, but one of the trails we did in Vimioso, Portugal. Being off road in Portugal, I just, like you say it, and I instantly have 10, probably more visions of like coming up over a ridge somewhere going, and it just takes your breath away because you're seeing something for the first time that you didn't know was there. I mean, Moab does that to you. I think Johnson Valley, Rubicon, all of those do it to you. But having had a chance to do it in Portugal was a whole, we went over I think it was a Roman bridge built in BC years to get to this trail kind of thing. And, so, as far as ones that most people will never get to see that a vehicle got me there to see, I'm going to go with that. But
that's awesome.
They're all my favorite. That's why I do this, Matson. That's why I spend my free time instead of watching. I'm sitting on committee meetings going, why are we doing this again? Because I care about public lands. That's why I do this again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my wall is reverberating. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but my wall was reverberating behind me because there's a 392 parked on the other side of those windows, and the owner of that 392 likes to start it up with the key remote while he's still in his office, and just so that it sits there.
I can't hear it anyway.
To get it out, I could feel it. I could feel it through my bones. Well, this has been incredible. It's one of our longest episodes, and it doesn't feel that way. And I know we could keep talking because there's just so much more to discuss and to look at. And we'll just have to do a part 2, where maybe we can actually talk about just the world of wheeling. And there's so many. I'm sure there's tons of. We could probably do an episode just on your greatest KOH stories. Right?
I can write you a whole book on that, but we might do an episode.
We have in fact, I think in 2 weeks we're going to be recording an episode with Jason Tshirt. Cool. For all of our listeners, Jason Tshirt is going to come out. He's going to talk about the new Bronco project that he's a part of and that Medical Click's a part of, and about the about KOH and just how great it was. And then hopefully, I failed last year to get Raoul on, and then we kind of forgot about it. And then, so hopefully I can get Raoul on this year
because be great to get him on.
Yeah, it's one thing, I think we said it was one thing that when he won, and that you don't want to be anywhere near the Gomez tent, or else you're going to get sucked into probably the greatest party that's ever been out on the lake bed.
I got sucked into that last year. Sucked into that.
But for him to win 2 in a row, that must have just been the entire party was just the lake bed. The lake bed was, I mean,
I made it to their camp at 9:30 and he was asleep.
Yes.
Wow, really?
So Shannon made a post that she went to go find him, and he was already asleep. Which, can you imagine? I mean, I'd be asleep too.
Yeah.
I just won King of the Hammers a second time. It's old school now. No big deal. Right.
But he got in at 2:00 in the afternoon. So I was trying to pace myself by not going over too soon afterwards. So I went 8:30, 9:00. So I wasn't I got Gomez last year for sure. I made it to my bed, but there was some big partying happening last year. So I was trying to pace myself. So I'm 8:30, 9 somewhere. I don't remember exactly what time I got there, but I'm he'll still be up. No, but Marcos was. And I think the best story I heard, I know we got to be done with this, but the best story I heard from Tom Ways actually was this is how it started. He goes, who actually gets to stop in the middle of the race and go take a nap and go to the bathroom in the middle of the race and actually still finish in the top 15? I'm like, did that happen? And Tom Waits is like, Marcos did that today. I go,
I kind of heard a buzz about that. And I
he
was
said,
like,
Marcos, did you really take a nap? Because yeah, they had to work on a repair. And I was like, oh, I can actually use the bathroom and lay down for a little bit and take a nap. So he did. He sure did in the middle of the race. Yes, he did.
He said
that is some serious comfort in what you're doing. Yeah.
You know what? Wow. That is a man who deals with time management on a different level every day and just goes, this is a prime time for me to utilize this for some me time. And did.
Yep.
Well,
for sure.
You know, we got to love our NorCal boys. Yes. They are definitely the entertainment and the factor that makes any of our NorCal rock racing events just so much fun to be at. So
they're phenomenal.
Well,
I know
that's awesome. Yes.
If you're watching this on YouTube, I got to tell them this before they let me on. I'm packing my house. That's why I look like I'm sitting in some weird warehouse right now. I'm moving. Anyway, anybody's watching it, I'm just a little embarrassed by this absent room behind me right now. So anyway, I just had to throw that in there.
Those three people were never going to notice.
Yeah, and for most of our guys, that's probably what their houses look like. I know it's what my house looks like every day. So it's what happens when you have the hurricane I call three little ones. The three B's come through. They just like, oh, this is fun. What does this happen? Crash. What does this do? Crash. Well, hey, Modern Jeepers, thank you for hanging out with us. Like I said, this has been another great episode. I've been looking forward to this, and it does not disappoint. Of course, we have a lot of stuff going on out there. You can check out our events at ModernJeeperAdventures.com. Check out news and information at ModernJeeper.com. Go join us at ModernJeeperForum.com and just be a part of the conversation over there. And check out, if you have questions about your rig, go to the tech section because we have tech experts that monitor and answer your questions. And of course, share this episode, like this episode, subscribe to this episode. If you need to reach Shannon and you have questions for Shannon, how do they get a hold of you, Shannon?
Well, the Shannon Welch is my Instagram, and the ShannonWelch@gmail.com has just become the easiest way people know to get a hold of me. So those are the two fastest ways to get a hold of me. So yeah.
Fantastic. And of course, you can reach me at Matson@MediClick.com, Corey@MediClick.com, and Jessy at MediClick.com. Corey, Jessy, anything you want to add before we wrap up this another amazing episode?
No, thank you, Shannon, so much. And for our listeners, we should have Moab registration up soon.
Bing, 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 bing.
Looking at me.
Anyway, what do I have to do with that? Then I saw Matson
he's looking at staring at me because I didn't get it done. And so he's like pinging me in a very nice.
And we're gonna probably shut
Corey
down.
Is incredibly polite. Like he could be pinging me every day with like, hey, what's this? Hey, what's that? Hey, what's this? I mean, he's so polite. He doesn't get angry with me.
No, we've been all super busy, and we've got a lot of projects going on. The truck's getting wrapped, the Jeep's getting wrapped. Like we got Death Valley coming up, Moab's coming up next, Easter Jeep Safari's on the horizon. Like all of these things. Shannon, thank you so much. I wish we. I can't wait to see you again, give you a hug, and it's been too long. So I know you're busy too. So again, happy Valentine's Day to everybody. And yeah. And
Shannon, this is an open invitation to all of our guests. But if you want to get out and just take a trip someplace, any one of our Modern Jeeper adventures, you're welcome to join us as our special guest and go out there. If you haven't done the Death Valley experience with in the way that getting into the history of it,
actually, no.
Corey, Jessy, and Dell do an incredible job. Corey has become quite the historian of the area, and it's not just a trip out there. It is an experience where you learn about it, and every trip is different. So you're welcome to join us out there, whether it's Moab or any of the other Tillamook, any of the other events we do. San Juan's of Colorado is a great one. You can just, crash at Corey's place.
Come on.
And so, you're welcome to join us anytime.
Just fly out.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the invite. And be careful. I might be taking you up on that. I need to get out on the trails more. So
absolutely,
come on,
absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Modern Jeepers, thank you for all your time and for joining us today. And we will see you on the trails.
It was a pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.